hello to all the people who's watching this video. I hope you are well and welcome to my channel where I talk about books and other related stuff. Today's video is going to be a non-fiction books recommendation video. These are some of the most important and influential non-fiction books. I do hope you derive a lot of strength and hope from these books as I have done, and I really hope you like my suggestions. So yeah, let's get on with this video. The first book that I'm going to recommend to you is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. This book has been an inspiration to many people since it was published. Viktor E. Frankl was a Holocaust survivor and he was in 4 concentration camps during World War II. And this is a self-written memoir where he talks about his experiences in those camps, and also he talks a lot about certain philosophical aspects. As a Holocaust memoir, this is definitely a sad book. It has a lot of sad elements, but it's more than just a tragic story. The basis or the core of the book is Mr. Viktor E. Frankl's philosophical outlook on tragedy and suffering. The amount of torment that these Holocaust survivors go through is unimaginable, and even after suffering so much in 4 concentration camps, Viktor E. Frankl, he emphasized on the meaning of life. He also emphasized on suffering and the meaning of life through suffering, how a person can find meaning even through suffering, like suffering, death, or those things that we consider negative are also some of the most important factors that gives meaning to our lives. Even after suffering so much, he continued to live. He emphasized on the importance of living a life. He helped a lot of people after the war was over. He helped them to understand the meaning of life, and he also devised a kind of therapy known as logotherapy. It is associated with the philosophical aspects of the meaning of life. This book is going to answer most of the existential aspects of life that bugs most of the humanity. Next book that I'm going to talk about and recommend is also a memoir, and it's When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. Paul Kalanithi was a neurosurgeon and he wrote this book at the time of his cancer. He was about 36 years of age and he was at the peak of his medical career. He was about to complete his residency when he was diagnosed with lung cancer. This book tells a lot about his life prior to the disease and his life after he was diagnosed with this disease. Now, he had a lot of difficulty writing this book because when one knows that he is going to die, when one knows that he has limited time on earth, it's difficult. In addition to emotional trauma, he went through a lot of physical trauma as well because of the aggravation of his cancer. The best thing that I liked about this book is how he dealt with such a situation. I loved the way how he organized his thoughts and feelings and insecurities and bring them together in this book. Like, even at such a difficult time, he decided to cope with his illness in the most courageous way possible. This is definitely a sad book because obviously it's directly written by someone who's dying. There are a lot of difficult things that we have to read about. Still gives a lot of hope. It still shows us how we can be courageous at any moment, no matter whatever risk we are going through or whatever problematic situation we are in. Sad thing is that he did not even get to complete this book. The last few pages, the epilogue of this book, is written by his wife. It shows us how uncertain things are, how uncertain one's future may be. We can learn how to give up our petty worries because so many people are just trying to live just one more day. The next book that I'm going to recommend is Educated by Tara Westover. This is again a memoir and it will tell you the importance of education. This is written by Tara Westover herself, and she narrates her story. So in her story, she grew up in a very rigid and conservative atmosphere in a place called Idaho, in the hills of Idaho. Tara's family was overtly rigid. They were religious fanatics, and they did not even allow their children to go to school. They were against education because they thought that people who went for an education, or people working for the government, or the schools that were run by the government, were ultimately immoral and anti-Christ, and they did not even possess a birth certificate. So at the time when Tara Westover should have been studying, she was going through all this labor work that her father was asking her to do. That place in which she grew up was cut off from the outside world, and it was kind of a very toxic atmosphere. Like within the family itself, there were things like betrayal and physical abuse. But Tara Westover, she got up on her feet, and despite her family's protest, despite her family being against her, she left her place and she went out to the wide world and got an education for herself, and that education, it's changed her life. She ultimately got the opportunity to see the world through her eyes, to see the world the way it was, not from her father's point of view. I liked the narration of the story. I think it was very structured, and it was also written very well. It has a certain flow to it, and I really loved the Tara story. It's really a very important story. It shows us what education, or the lack of education, can do. The next book that I'm going to recommend is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I read this book about 4 years ago and fell in love with the way the author addressed creativity. This book is all about creativity and learning how to live the most creative life. Elizabeth Gilbert is best known for her memoir, Eat, Pray, Love. And being a writer herself, or being a creative person herself, she goes on to relate her experiences with creativity, and she goes on to give a range of advices regarding this topic. This book is divided into 6 sections, and each section deals with one aspect of creativity. For example, the courage to be able to start something or put one's thing out there for the world to see. Also, it tells us the concept of ideas and where ideas come from, and other aspects like persistence, etc. I really loved the book, and I'm due for a reread. It's such an important book for creatives and for anyone. This book busts a lot of myths that surrounds creativity, and it's very structured and it has a very beautiful flow to it. I highly recommend this book. Next book that I'm going to recommend is a recent read, and that's Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. I have discussed about this book in detail, and if you are interested to check it out, I will leave the link here or in the description below. Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. It's about Mitch Albom, that is the author's dying professor. So his professor, Morrie Schwartz, he was diagnosed with a very fatal disease, and he was about to die. And when Mitch, he came to know about this, he kind of reconnected with his former professor and went to his place. He paid a series of 14 visits to his professor, and during each of these visits, Mitch Albom used to talk with his professor about some of the most significant topics associated with life, like forgiveness, friendships, death, etc. And his professor always had the best of advice. He was this epitome of wisdom, and he was able to give so much to people even during his end moments. Now, this book, even though it's about a dying man, it's a very inspiring book, because this man, Morrie Schwartz, even though he was dying, he refused to be traumatized by the fact that he was dying, and he decided to live his life even during his end moments and give a lot to others, give things of value to other people and to his former student Mitch Albom. So I would definitely recommend this book to anyone. The next book that I'm going to recommend is Becoming by Michelle Obama. Now, she doesn't need any introduction, but yeah, this is a memoir of Michelle Obama written by herself, and this book talks a lot about her earlier life, about her education or her relationship with her family, and then again her relationship with Mr. Obama, and her life after becoming the first lady, her struggles after becoming the first lady. This book really covers a lot about her time period during her childhood, or during her college years, or after she became the first lady. And this is a very inspiring book. Like, Michelle Obama is so inspiring, and she has a lot to share. I cannot go into much details about this book because there's a lot of inspiration to be gained from this lady. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this book if you haven't read it already. The last book that I'm going to recommend is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. This book talks about being in the present, of being in the now. Not even a second prior or not even a second later, but this moment that we are in. This book is more on the spiritual side, but there are also practical outcomes that's associated with the practice of presence in our day-to-day lives. This book talks about our mind, the state of our mind, or the state of our unruly thoughts that ultimately govern us and control our day-to-day lives, and how by practicing presence and awareness we can kind of reverse this process and be a master of our thoughts and our mind, and in a way improve our lives. This book is a lot more complex. It also talks about some other complex topics like the human ego and how it kinds of makes our lives miserable, but I'm not going to go into those complex details. Like, personally, I love those things, but even if you don't like spiritual matters a lot, you can get some practical tips on how to be in the present and how being in the present would help you throughout your life. So that was all for today's video, and I do hope you check out these suggestions, and I'll come back with another video soon. Till then, do take care, and yeah, goodbye.